I went back and watched the first Despicable Me movie, and it honestly shocked me how different it feels compared to what the franchise is now.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
It's way more grounded than the sequels, and it actually lets scenes breathe. It's about an insecure villain who adopts three girls for selfish reasons, but then slowly realises that he actually cares about them, and somewhere along the way, that emotion stopped being the centre of the franchise.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
The original Despicable Me hides its real story behind a strange concept, like most animated movies at the time did: a villain stealing the moon. But beneath that, the movie is actually about insecurity. Gru doesn't just want to be evil, he wants to matter. When Vector steals the pyramid, Gru's angry because someone outdid him, because suddenly he's not the headline villain anymore. He's yesterday's news, and every scene with his mum reinforces why that hurts him so much. She downplays everything he does. Even when he tells her that he's planning to steal the moon, she treats him like a burden.
When you hear about it, you're going to be very proud.
And that dynamic, it explains everything about Gru. When he adopts Margot, Edith and Agnes, he's still in that mindset. They're not children to him, they're just a solution, a way to get access to Vector's fortress. And what makes the film so strong is that it doesn't rush the change. Gru forgets about the girls, he even plans to leave them at the fair. But that moment at the amusement park is huge, because you can actually see the shift happening before he does. He reluctantly stays, but ends up having a fun time. And the bedtime story scene is awkward on purpose. He doesn't suddenly become warm and perfect, he stumbles through it. That's what makes it so real. And by the time we get to the dance recital, the emotional choice, it feels earned. He's finally faced with the thing that he thought he wanted his whole life: recognition. The biggest villain win imaginable, but he ends up feeling empty because the people that he actually cares about aren't there. That's character growth. And the minions work here because they're not the emotional centre. They amplify Gru's personality, they don't compete with it. They're there to break up the emotional moments and to create humour. And that balance is why the film works so well, because the minions aren't the focus. And now look at Despicable Me 2. Gru has already changed. He's a dad, he's become softer, and he's retired from villainy. So the film has to find a new internal struggle. Instead of insecurity about status, it leans into insecurity about relationships. He's awkward and he doesn't know how to date. He overthinks everything. And Lucy is chaotic but emotionally open, which makes her a good contrast. But here's the difference. In the first film, Gru's internal conflict shaped the entire narrative. But in the sequel, the spy plot runs almost independently from his emotional arc. The El Macho storyline is fun, but it doesn't deeply challenge who Gru is as a person. It challenges what he does. And this is where you really start noticing the minion focus expanding. The purple minion transformation subplot takes up a lot of runtime. It's visually loud and chaotic, but it's not rooted in Gru's emotional development. The film still has heart, especially with Agnes in the unicorn callback, but that centre of gravity is shifting. It's less about transformation and more about maintaining energy. And then we get minions, and structurally, this is where the franchise completely changes, because the minions are now the protagonists. The issue is that the minions are reaction-based characters. Their comedy comes from misunderstanding situations, breaking things, miscommunicating, and that works brilliantly when they're disrupting someone else's arc. But when they are the arc, the film has to replace emotional progression with escalating scenarios. Scarlet Overkill is stylish and entertaining, but the emotional stakes never deepen. The goal remains external: find a boss and survive the chaos. Now, there's nothing wrong with that kind of storytelling, but it's different from the previous entries. The engine of the franchise shifts from who is the character becoming to what's the next big sequence. And because the film made nearly $1 billion, that structure becomes validated. Then by the time Despicable Me 3 arrives, the identity split becomes really obvious. Gru meeting Drew should be powerful. Gru's literally confronting an alternate version of himself, someone who embraced villainy differently, but it's played mostly for contrast and jokes, rather than introspection. Meanwhile, Lucy is adjusting to motherhood, which could have mirrored Gru's original arc in an interesting way, but that thread doesn't get the same emotional weight. And then the minions split off entirely. The prison storyline is mildly funny, but it's almost a separate short film inserted into the runtime. Instead of one emotional spine, the movie has multiple parallel storylines, and if it was more structured and less Minion focused, it could have been one of the best Despicable Me movies. Because Balthazar Brat is a fun villain, and when he's on screen, it's actually interesting to watch. And again, if they had developed the Gru and Drew story in the same emotional way as Despicable Me, it really could have worked. With Minions: The Rise of Gru, there was a real opportunity to return to insecurity as a theme. Young Gru trying to prove himself to the Vicious Six is a great setup, but again, the story leans heavily into movement and escalation. The Kung Fu Minion training, the elaborate chases, the expanding villain world building, Gru's emotional journey of wanting to be taken seriously is present, but it moves quickly. The film doesn't linger in that insecurity the way that the first one did. It resolves faster, it's smoother, but it's less intimate. After Minions, you could see what needed to be improved for a sequel. Adding Gru was a smart decision, and if they'd leaned into Gru's insecurity, the film really could have worked. The best parts of the movie are when it's focused on Gru, and by Despicable Me 4, the franchise identity is fully locked in. The introduction of the Mega Minions says everything about where the focus is. The energy is high from the start, and the pacing is relentless. Gru still has some family moments, but they exist with a framework built to deliver constant movement. The emotional arc is present, but it's not the engine anymore. It's focused on the Minions. Maxie and Lamal is barely in the movie, and they completely skip over the breakout from prison. Instead, they focused on the Minions and other subplots that didn't work, and that's why it's probably the worst Despicable Me movie. The Minions didn't ruin Despicable Me, they just became popular, so like most companies do, they decided to make that the focus. The first film builds towards a deeply personal choice that redefines a character, and the later films build towards bigger and faster sequences that redefine the brand. And when you go back to watch the first movie, you realise how much it relied on quiet character beats instead of constant escalation. That's why it feels so different. If you like this video, hit the follow button. I've got more videos like this coming. And if you agree or even disagree, drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think. I'll see you in the next video.